David Cohen, had filmed 127 war zones across 3 continents. But nothing prepared him for the moment Israeli soldiers would mistake him for the enemy. Locked in a Gaza detention facility with the very people he came to document, this Jewish journalist would discover that the most important story of his life would never make it to broadcast. Some truths are too dangerous to air. David Cohen's experienced hands adjust the camera lens, capturing the devastated streets of Gaza City with practiced precision. These same hands have held cameras in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and a dozen other conflict zones over his 20-year career. At 48, he's one of BBC's most respected war correspondents, known for telling stories others won't touch. Beside him, his cameraman and best friend Omar Hassan checks the equipment. Omar is Palestinian-British, 35, raised in London but never forgetting his roots. They've worked together for 8 years, covering conflicts where David's Jewish background and Omar's Palestinian heritage created a unique perspective neither could achieve alone. "David, the light is perfect right now. We should get the refugee camp footage before it gets dark," Omar says, reviewing their shot list. David nods, scanning the area. They're in Gaza to document civilian life during the ongoing conflict, a story approved by both Israeli and international authorities. Their press credentials are impeccable, their permissions verified. But in war zones, paperwork means nothing when bullets fly. They arrived 3 days ago, staying with Omar's distant relatives in a partially destroyed apartment building. The family, Abu Khalil, his wife Fatima, their 3 children, and elderly mother, welcomed them despite having barely enough food for themselves. "Your camera can show the world what we live," Abu Khalil told David the first night. "Maybe then they will understand we are not terrorists. We are just people trying to survive." David has heard similar words in every conflict zone. The desperate hope that if people just saw the truth, things would change. He stopped believing that years ago, but he still films, because someone has to witness. Omar comes from a journalism family. His father was a photographer who documented the Second Intifada, killed by a stray bullet in 2002. Omar was only 13, holding his father's camera when it happened. He became a cameraman to finish his father's work, showing Palestinian suffering to a world that often looked away. "My father used to say, 'The camera is mightier than the gun, because it shows what guns destroy,'" Omar tells David as they walk through rubble-filled streets. David, Jewish and raised in London's Golders Green, came to journalism from a different path. His grandfather survived Auschwitz, taught him that silence enables atrocity. "Never be silent when you witness injustice," his grandfather would say. Never. This assignment created tension at home. David's brother Aaron, a staunch Israeli supporter, stopped speaking to him. "You're filming propaganda for terrorists," Aaron said during their last conversation. "I'm filming human beings," David replied. "That's not propaganda." The partnership between David and Omar works because they challenge each other. David questions Palestinian narratives. Omar challenges Israeli perspectives. Together they try to find something rare in conflict journalism: nuanced truth. Their 4th day in Gaza, they film at a makeshift school. Children sit on broken furniture, learning math from a teacher who hasn't been paid in months. David interviews a 10-year-old girl named Layla. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" David asks in Arabic. He's fluent in 6 languages. "I want to be alive," Layla answers simply. Omar lowers his camera, visibly moved. David writes the quote in his notebook, knowing it will never make the final edit. Too raw, too political, too uncomfortable for viewers eating dinner. That evening, filming a medical clinic, they document Dr. Samira treating patients with supplies so limited she reuses bandages. A young mother brings her malnourished baby, begging for formula. "We have none left," Dr. Samira tells her, tears streaming. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." David films it all, his professional detachment cracking. This is different from other war zones. The scale of civilian suffering, the complete lack of escape routes, the children with ancient eyes. "Omar, are you sure you want this footage aired? Your family lives here. That's exactly why it must be aired. The world needs to see." Day 6 brings disaster. They're filming displaced families sheltering in a UN facility when fighting erupts nearby. Not the distant booms they've grown accustomed to, but close, immediate gunfire. "Get down," Omar shouts, tackling David behind a concrete barrier. Israeli forces are conducting a raid, searching for militants. In the chaos, David and Omar try to show their press credentials, shouting in English, "Press, international press, BBC." But in the confusion, the soldiers see Omar's Palestinian features, David's camera equipment, their location in a hostile area. Within minutes, they're face down on the ground, hands zip-tied behind their backs. "We're journalists, British journalists," David yells in Hebrew, hoping his fluency proves their legitimacy. "Shut up!" A young soldier, barely 20, presses a rifle to David's head. They're thrown into a military vehicle with 6 Palestinian men, also detained. The Palestinians stare at David with recognition. They've seen him filming. Know he's press. One man, middle-aged with kind eyes, whispers in Arabic, "You are the journalist. Why do they arrest you?" "Mistake," David replies. "They'll release us when they check credentials." But he's not certain. In the fog of war, mistakes can be fatal. They're taken to a detention facility, a converted warehouse on the Israeli side of the border. David and Omar are separated from the Palestinian detainees initially, placed in a small cell. "This is insane," Omar paces frantically. "We have documentation. They can verify our credentials in minutes." "In theory," David says grimly. He's covered enough conflicts to know bureaucracy and war don't mix well. Hours pass. No interrogation, no phone calls, no explanation. Through the concrete walls they hear crying, shouting, prayers in Arabic. Finally, an Israeli intelligence officer arrives. Captain Avi Goldstein, professional, exhausted, skeptical. "You claim to be BBC journalists." "We don't claim, we are," David responds in Hebrew. "Check with BBC London. Check with your own press liaison office. We have approved permits." Goldstein examines their equipment, documents, press cards. David sees recognition dawn. These are legitimate journalists. But Goldstein's expression doesn't soften. "Your footage, we need to review it." "That's not how press freedom works," Omar protests. "This isn't London. You filmed in an active combat zone. The footage could contain intelligence information. They have no choice." Goldstein and his team review every second of their recordings. Hours of footage showing destroyed homes, wounded children, desperate families, overwhelmed hospitals. Goldstein's face remains impassive, but David notices his hands clench when Layla's interview plays. "I want to be alive." "This footage," Goldstein says finally, "is inflammatory. It presents a one-sided narrative. It presents what we saw," David counters. "Reality isn't one-sided. Reality is we're fighting terrorists who hide among civilians. Your footage doesn't show that context. We filmed what was in front of us. Hungry children, wounded civilians. Is that not real?" The debate continues, professional but heated. Finally, Goldstein makes a decision that surprises them. "I'm releasing you." But the footage stays. "National security. That's censorship." Omar protests. "That's war. Be grateful you're walking out." But they don't walk out. The bureaucratic machinery moves slowly. Paperwork gets lost. Shift changes bring new guards who don't understand the situation. And suddenly a few hours becomes days. Worse, they're moved into general detention, placed with the Palestinian prisoners. The facility is overcrowded, designed for 50, but holding 200. Men, some elderly, some teenage boys, crammed into cells meant for a quarter their number. David and Omar find themselves in a large holding room with 30 other detainees. The conditions shock them. Minimal food, restricted water, no medical attention for those who need it. An elderly man, maybe 70, sits in the corner, clearly ill. His name is Abu Ahmad, a retired teacher from Rafah. "Why are you here?" David asks gently in Arabic. "They say my nephew is Hamas. I haven't seen him in 5 years, but I am his uncle, so I am here." Omar films secretly with a small camera he hid in his clothing. Dangerous, potentially suicidal, but instinct takes over. A teenage boy, Mahmoud, only 16, tells them his story. "I was getting water for my family. They stopped me at checkpoint, found my brother's name on a list. Now I am here." "How long?" David asks. 43 days. No charges, no trial, no lawyer, administrative detention. David's journalist objectivity struggles against his grandfather's teachings. These aren't terrorists. They're terrified civilians caught in a machinery that doesn't distinguish between militant and innocent. Over the following days, David and Omar document everything mentally, knowing Omar's hidden camera won't last long. They witness an elderly woman, Hassan, 72, diabetic, denied insulin. She deteriorates visibly, begging guards for medication. A father, Youssef, separated from his disabled son during a raid, desperate for any information. He's 12, he can't speak, he needs his medicine. Please, please tell me where he is." Guards who range from professional to cruel. Some bring extra water secretly. Others seem to enjoy the power they hold. The smell becomes unbearable. Too many bodies, inadequate sanitation, summer heat turning the warehouse into an oven. Omar struggles most. These are his people, suffering in front of him, and his camera is useless. "We're journalists. We document. That's our purpose. And here I am, watching, unable to show anyone." "We're witnesses," David reminds him. "That still matters, does it? Witnesses to what? Who will believe us? You think Britain will care? BBC will air this? We're Jewish and Palestinian journalists trapped together. It's too perfect a metaphor. They'll think we're making it up." David has no answer, because Omar's right. Their own story is too on the nose, too conveniently symbolic. Truth often sounds less believable than fiction. They become informal mediators in the facility. David's Hebrew allows communication with guards. Omar's Arabic connects with detainees. They negotiate for basic needs: more water, medical attention for the worst cases, information about family members. Captain Goldstein visits occasionally, always alone, always looking more tired. "Why are you still here?" he asks David privately during one visit. "You tell me. We're journalists with verified credentials. It's complicated. There are questions about your footage, your contacts." "What contacts?" "We filmed civilians. Some of those civilians have relatives in Hamas. That makes you potentially compromised. That makes everyone in Gaza potentially compromised by that logic." Goldstein doesn't disagree, but can't change it. "I'm trying to expedite your release, but it takes time. People are suffering here, Avi. That boy's been here 2 months with no charges. That's above my authority. Is your conscience above your authority?" Goldstein leaves without answering. The breakthrough comes from an unexpected source. Hassan, the diabetic woman, collapses. Her blood sugar crashes dangerously. David and Omar scream for help, banging on doors, creating enough noise that guards respond. "She needs insulin, now, or she dies." David shouts in Hebrew. A young medic arrives, assesses her condition, orders immediate treatment. Hassan stabilizes, but barely. That night, the medic, Corporal Rachel Mizrahi, returns with extra medical supplies. She treats several detainees quietly, professionally. "You're the BBC journalists," she says to David and Omar. "Yes, my cousin works at BBC Arabic. He mentioned your names. You were reported missing." Hope surges. "Can you help us contact anyone?" Rachel hesitates. "I could lose my position, or worse. People need to know what's happening here," Omar pleads. Rachel struggles visibly. She's a soldier, following orders, but also clearly disturbed by what she sees. "I'll think about it." 2 days later, Rachel smuggles a phone. One call, 5 minutes, heavy risk. David calls his editor in London. "Mark, it's David Cohen. Listen carefully. I have 5 minutes. Omar and I have been detained for 9 days. We're in a facility with 200 Palestinians, mostly civilians, held without charge. Conditions are inhumane. This is the story." The phone goes dead. Rachel panics, takes it back. "That's all I can do." But it's enough. BBC mobilizes. British embassy gets involved. Pressure mounts. 3 days later, David and Omar are released. They walk out into sunlight, blinking, disoriented. "Your equipment and footage are confiscated," they're told. "You're banned from re-entering Gaza. Any public statements about your detention will result in prosecution for security violations." They sign papers they don't read, desperate to leave. At the border before leaving, Omar looks back at the facility. "We're leaving." "They're not. We're witnesses now," David says. "We tell their story." "How?" "We have no footage. We can't legally speak about it. They've silenced us perfectly." Back in London, they face immediate pressure. BBC lawyers advise silence, security concerns, legal jeopardy, political complications. Their editor, sympathetic but pragmatic, kills the story. "I believe you, but we have no footage, no corroboration, and massive legal risk. I can't air accusations against the Israeli military based on your word alone." David's family fractures further. His brother Aaron: "You were detained because you broke the rules. You're not a victim. You're a propagandist." Omar's Palestinian community questions why he hasn't spoken out. "You saw the truth and you're silent? What kind of Palestinian are you?" Trapped between legal threats and moral obligation, David and Omar make a decision. They write everything down, detailed accounts, names they remember, faces they can't forget. They submit it to human rights organizations, international bodies, independent journalists not constrained by corporate legal departments. Slowly, quietly, their testimony corroborates broader reports of detention conditions. 6 months later, some detainees they met are released. Mahmoud, the 16-year-old held for 8 months total, finally goes home. He contacts Omar through relatives. "Thank you for witnessing, for seeing us as human." Hassan died in detention, 3 weeks after David and Omar left. Diabetic coma, inadequate medical care. Youssef never found his son, still searching. Abu Ahmad, the elderly teacher, released after 5 months. No charges, no explanation, no apology. 1 year after their detention, David and Omar produce an independent documentary. No major broadcaster will air it, but online it finds an audience. Through the lens, Stories from Inside carefully avoids explicit details that could trigger prosecution, but captures the essence of what they witnessed. The documentary interviews former detainees, documents patterns of administrative detention, and tells stories of families torn apart. David and Omar appear professional, measured, but their trauma shows. "We went to Gaza as journalists, confident in our press credentials and international protections," David narrates. "We learned that in modern conflict, there are no neutrals, no observers, no safe spaces. There is only power and those subject to it." Omar adds, "My father died believing the camera could change the world. I learned it can't, but it can preserve memory, and memory, eventually, becomes history. Maybe that's enough." The documentary wins awards at small festivals, gets written up in alternative media, changes nothing materially. The detention facility still operates. Administrative detention continues. The conflict grinds on. But something changed in David and Omar. They continue journalism, but differently. Less faith in their own objectivity, more awareness of their limitations, deeper respect for the stories they'll never fully tell. They speak at universities, train younger journalists, emphasize ethical complexity over easy narratives. There are no simple stories in conflict zones, David tells students. Every narrative excludes something. Every frame makes choices about what's visible and what's not. The best we can do is be honest about that. 2 years later, Captain Avi Goldstein leaves the military. He never speaks publicly about what he saw, but quietly volunteers with an Israeli human rights organization, documenting detention abuses. Rachel Mizrahi, the medic who helped them, faces no consequences for her phone smuggling. She finishes her service, becomes a civilian nurse, works with refugee populations. The facility where David and Omar were held is eventually closed following international pressure, replaced by a new one, with slightly better conditions. Same purpose, different building. Hassan's family receives no compensation, no acknowledgement. Just another elderly woman who died during a war. Mahmoud, now 19, studies journalism. He emails Omar occasionally. I want to tell our stories, like you tried to. David and Omar stay friends, bonded by an experience no one else quite understands. They meet monthly for coffee, sometimes talking about their detention, more often sitting in comfortable silence. Do you regret going? Omar asks one afternoon. David considers. I regret that our footage was confiscated. I regret we couldn't do more. But going? No. Witnessing matters. Even when witnessing changes nothing immediately. My father would agree. Your father was right. The camera is mightier than the gun. Not because it stops the gun, but because it outlasts it. Long after the guns are silent, the images remain. They never return to Gaza. Banned, intimidated, and honestly traumatized. But they carry Gaza with them, in memories of faces, voices, stories that haunt their sleep. David's final entry in his journal, written 3 years after the detention. I've covered wars for 20 years. I've seen atrocities, documented suffering, interviewed victims and perpetrators. But 9 days in that facility taught me more than 2 decades in the field. I learned that bearing witness isn't about changing the world immediately. It's about refusing to let people disappear without trace. Every name I remember, every story I preserve, every detail I document, it's an act of defiance against erasure. Hassan died, but I remember her. Mahmoud was detained unjustly, but his story is recorded. Youssef still searches for his son, but someone knows his pain. That's not enough. It's never enough. But it's what we have. In the end, journalism isn't about solutions. It's about memory. And memory, however painful, is a form of justice, the only form sometimes available. Omar and David continue their work, carrying the weight of what they witnessed, the knowledge of what they couldn't change, and the small hope that somewhere, sometime, their witness might matter. Some truths are too dangerous to broadcast, too uncomfortable to air, too complex for sound bites. But they exist, and as long as someone remembers, bears witness, refuses to look away, those truths survive. The camera didn't save Hassan. The footage didn't free Mahmoud faster. The documentary didn't change policy. But 30 people in a detention facility, invisible to the world, were seen, were documented, were remembered. In wars where dehumanization is a weapon, being seen as human is itself an act of resistance. David Cohen and Omar Hassan learned that being a witness isn't about glory or impact. It's about showing up, documenting, remembering, even when no one's watching, even when nothing changes, even when the cost is high. Because someone has to remember, someone has to see, someone has to refuse to forget. That's what journalists do. Not heroes, not saviors, just witnesses. And sometimes that's the most important role of all.